Welcome to the Green Table Talk. I am your host, Jennen Johnson. Today, we have my friend Charles Cook joining us. You would have seen Charles in one of our previous episodes where he shared his transplant journey. And we also have Sam Day joining us today, along with Chris, videographer extraordinaire. Today, we are going to be discussing heart transplant, Canada versus US. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. Greatly appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thank you for having us.
Excellent. So just to give you a little bit of information, according to the Government of Canada's website, as of March 13th of this year, there are over 4,300 people in Canada waiting for a transplant right now, and only a fraction of Canadians are actually registered donors. Now, obviously, the need is critical for donation, regardless of the organ. According to the Canadian Institute for Health, they state that the wait list in Canada is 6 months or longer. This was as of January of this year. Now, of course, I'm sure the list is much longer at this point for a transplant or for a heart transplant. According to YaleMedicine.org and the University of California, San Francisco, they say that the wait list is 6 months or longer as well for a heart transplant. Now, there are various things that factor in when it comes to transplantation, especially for the heart. They say that your blood type, obviously, is a factor, your body size, how sick you are, antibodies in your blood that can make the organ rejection a concern, etc. So with this information that I just provided, Sam, how about you tell us your story in terms of your heart transplant, and did any of this factor into your journey?
Sure. So my transplant happened 2015, April 20th. So I just celebrated my 8 years. We call it heart anniversary. I don't know what you call it in Canada, but it's probably universal. But so I celebrated that. But let's go back a little bit. So mine wasn't like, there's different kinds of scenarios where people need a heart, and I wasn't like the one that got sick today and needed a heart tomorrow, So I suffered with CHF, which is congestive heart failure, for several years. So I had my first heart attack. So that was the first time I was saved. I had my first heart attack in 2008, also in April. And then from then on, I found out that I had CHF, and the heart deteriorates, over time. And so I wasn't told that I needed a transplant at the time. When I had the heart attack, I got stents, and I just went about my business, I back to work and everything else. And but over time, it does get worse and worse. So fast forward to 2010, I needed I call it CABG, which is a cabbage, or basically a bypass, and that was a quadruple bypass. So that was the second time I was saved, because you could tell the heart was getting worse and worse. It was getting more and more enlarged, and heart function, circulation, everything was suffering. I was retaining tons of fluid. I couldn't walk and stuff. I was falling all over the place, and but I had already resumed work. And that took me to traveling to India, even back and forth. So that's a long way away, and so I was actually stuck in India for 5 years with that bad heart. So I went through the healthcare and some surgeries there as well. So that's where I had my bypass in India. And then I recovered from that. I had to get a device implanted because I was just in bad shape. Then finally in 2014, I was able to come back here to the US because, most of the rest of the world, other than Europe, there are very, very few heart transplants. Like in India, they do some, but very, very few. So I was told, since you're a citizen of the US, try to get back to the US and try to get on the waiting list. And so I came back in 2014 and did the workup. There's a whole process that you have to go through here. They do every single test in the book. I'm sure, Charles, I'll hear from you, but you guys may have the same process, but they do everything. The evaluation involved is very, very detailed. Every single scan, every single test, psychological evaluation, and also like financial status. Do you have good insurance? You guys have different insurance, obviously, but here we have to have either government insurance, which is Medicare, or you have to be on private insurance, through your employer or something like that. Otherwise, you can't get one. Basically, you just can't get one. And so that's probably one of the differences in Canada. You guys have national health care, and it's a lot different. So I was basically evaluated, and then insurance is specific by state. You guys have provinces, and we have different states. So 50 states here, and then so mine was not good in some states, and it was good in some states. So I was evaluated in Virginia and DC, where that's the area I live in, but it wasn't good there. It was good in Maryland. So I was actually referred over to Maryland, and that's where I walked into the doctor's office on this December 2014, December 22nd, 2014, and the doctor took one look at me and she said, "We're gonna have to admit you." So there's no question of any. And I was like, "Are you sure? It's going to be Christmas. Let me go home." There's nothing to do at home. I was sick, but I just wanted to be out of the hospital. So I negotiated with her and she let me go. On the 26th, my wife reminded me we got to go back to the hospital and I was like, I'm fine at home and I'm walking around. She's like, "No, we got to go." I went in, and as it turns out, I didn't leave the hospital for 7 months.
Wow.
So, and I came out of the hospital with a new donor heart. So it was a long, long journey before the transplant, as well as, during the transplant. So I was listed on the list here after all my workup in probably January of 2015. And I was waiting, and currently, I believe there's about 4,000 or so people on the waiting list here in the US for hearts. Overall, 106,000 people on the list, but out of that, only 50% or so are actually active, and out of that number, only 90% are kidney folks who need kidneys, so very few heart and lungs, livers and kidneys are the most transplants here. And so I was listed in January, and then I was waiting, and I don't know about Canada, but in here you have statuses. So status 7 is inactive, and then status 4, you might have an LVAD or something. So I wasn't eligible for an LVAD or any other bridge. So that's why they had to keep me in the hospital, because I had left and right heart failure. So I wasn't allowed to leave the hospital. And so while in the hospital, we have these things. I don't know, Charles, it's called a swan. Actually, it's like a thing that sticks out from your central line. It looks like a swan.
A PICC line coming out of your neck. Yeah.
I had 2 of them, so, and all drugs going through them, all kinds of drugs. And so I was on tons of drugs just to keep me alive, and so all of that was going on. And then at the same time, insurance, social workers were involved, because insurance stuff was being worked out, whether or not I was eligible for the government program. And because I didn't have a job, right? I was not employed when I came back from India and all this stuff. I was just basically surviving. So there was no job. So I was able to get on that insurance, through disability programs. And then, so I was waiting, Super Bowl came and went, and it was playing heavily on my mind. It was just because of all the drugs, I was depressed. I was I was texting my doctor and said, "I want to go home and die." At that point, I was probably waiting about 3 months, right? And so she was like, didn't say much, but she sent people to my room, because I was in this room for so long, and I became friends with all the nurses, and everyone was like a family to me. But she just sent people to the room to counsel me, right? And then I was also getting therapy and stuff like that, but I was in bad shape. So much fluid was being drained from me, like they call it tapping. So they were tapping from my belly and all over the place, so I was still falling and all this stuff. So, and I was giving up hope, but my wife was really like, "You're gonna get this, you got this," So, and then one evening, I was actually on my phone, like talking to a bank rep fighting a bill because they were billing me for something. I'm like, I'm dying and you're billing me, So I was like literally fighting with them on the phone, and the hospital phone rang and my wife said, you want to get that? It's the doctor. I said, can it wait? Because I'm on the phone here. I'm busy, She's like, no, take this call, right? And then I didn't know it was going to be the call, So the doctor got on the phone and she's like, what's this I hear? You want to go home? She's like, I'm like, yeah, but I'm reconciled now. I'll wait. I've waited 4 months. I can do this, She's like, well, lucky for you. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. in the OR, we have a perfect match heart for you and all this stuff. And, the whole thing was a crazy moment, like tears and laughter. And all the nurses came barging into the room. It was 9 p.m. at night. They didn't care about other patients because they were all expecting something, So we were all like really, all kinds of emotions were going through. And then so the next day, sometimes it doesn't work out. So I didn't know all this stuff at the time, like since then I've learned a lot more, but sometimes it doesn't work out. It's like a dry run, so, but lucky for me, it did. It was 11-hour surgery. It happened and, the surgeons came and said it was great, and I think a day and a half later, I guess my color was back and I was looking like a whole different new person. I had all this energy, I couldn't believe what was going on. And, in this critical care unit, it's a ward, so you go around, you can walk, they make you walk pretty quickly after the transplant, so, and with all the paraphernalia, because I had like 2 poles and all kinds of drips and this and that. And so that I was walking and I'm like, how many laps can I do? They're like, slow it down, Mr. Day. So I'm like, what's the record? I gotta go. So it was kind of like a lot of energy, so but and then slowly ups and downs. Transplant is full of ups and downs, so even a day later, they said, well, my kidneys are compromised. So I had to like get on the green machine, which is like a dialysis machine, so I did that for a few hours and then I was worried about, oh no, I might need a kidney and all that stuff. So, but luckily, all that worked out and they make you work out. I mean, they make you go to the rehab right away too. I did all that, but, then I was stuck with some infections in the hospital. So that's why I couldn't leave till July of that year, so, and even when I left, I went home with it's like a device that sucks out from the wound. I had a really bad wound, which was infected. So it kept sucking out the juices. It was gross, but I had this huge hole here. And so I did that, and my wife had to administer like antibiotics at home through IV and all this stuff. But all in all, all that it was a miracle, even when I saw the surgeons after, they said, because I was high risk and, no one really wanted, my name had come up here. They have a committee meeting every week. So at the transplant center, a bunch of doctors and other bigwigs meet and say, all right, these are the people who could be up next if we get an offer for a heart. So I guess my name came up a few times, but they didn't want to do it because it was too risky or something. And then eventually my cardiologist, who I call my angel, she kind of convinced people and put the right surgeons in the room. So I had the same surgeon who did the pig heart transplant, from the pig to the human, Dr. Griffith. So he was my surgeon as well. And I was like, wow. And I mean, that happened like 2021, but still, so I have pictures with him and stuff like that from way back. But so I'm here now and I'm just so grateful. From then on, I've just become like this advocate, and I'm so passionate about just giving back. I got to give paid forward, and I'm in several like organizations and just not just organ donation, but also about transplantation, because I have this formula like organ donation, #organ donation plus #transplantation equals #miracles. And that's what we are. Recipients are miracles, and it's not a fix. People don't realize that it's a treatment. So I mentor people and stuff like that, and it's just good to give back. And I haven't been able to go like full-time work, but I'm happy because that's when I want to do this. So
yes.
and I was able to watch my daughters grow up. That was a
Mhm.
huge thing for me. You know, I have two daughters now, they're 24 and 20.
Mhm.
So I watched them graduate high school, watch one of them graduate college, watch one of them do her dream job of being a teacher. It's just, these are the small things that, you know, I taught them how to drive. I was able to do that, how to drive
Mhm.
and stuff, you know, people take it for granted, but, you know, so it's been amazing since, and 8 years, I still think about the numbers, you know, the statistics.
Yes.
There are some statistics, but I choose to think they're kind of old, you know.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
there have been some improvements, although, you know, we still have to take those drugs that cause all kinds of problems. And
Yeah.
I do still have a compromised kidney, but it's stable, you know, so
Okay.
that's all I can hope for. And yeah, so that's my story. And there's a lot of things between, but that's my main story.
Mhm. Well, thank you for sharing your journey.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your anniversary,
Thank
by the
you.
way.
Thank you.
Didn't want
Yeah.
to interrupt, but that's
And
big.
it's in the US is Donate Life Month, April, and it seems I think you guys too do something in April, right? So you know, so I'm really blessed, you know. And so this past Donate Life Month, I was able to. I always speak a lot, you know, in different engagements and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So this past April, I was able to. We have a flag raising, so that's when, in honor of the donors of organ, tissue, and eyes,
Yes.
you know, they'll raise the flag
Mhm.
at the transplant centers or at the donor hospitals. So this time I was able to speak at my hospital where I got the transplant. And
Okay.
so it was an amazing experience because, you know, the whole staff comes out and the doctors, and there's other donor family members in there. And I shared my story and talked to all of them. And then also I was able to talk to the donor hospital, you know, at their flag raising. So that's where my donor, I call him hero, my donor hero
Mhm.
passed away.
Yes.
And you know, there's a wall with all the names. I obviously don't know who it was. I've been told it was a gentleman. He died of a stroke.
Mhm.
So in here we can't write directly at all to the donor family, you know, so you
Okay.
have to go through the OPO, the Organ Procurement
Yes.
Organization, right? So I don't know if it's the same there, but
Mhm.
they definitely don't want instant
Direct contact.
contact or sharing
Yes.
of private, you know, it's very, very much into privacy and stuff.
Have you
So
reached out to your
I
donor?
did write, and I'll keep writing. I tell everybody to keep writing, you know, because
Okay.
I've heard of people like contacting people after 20 years even, you know. So
Mhm.
I know it was a 49-year-old gentleman, and he always wanted to be a donor, you know,
Mhm.
so there was no issues, you know, because here if you're designated on your license or if you're registered on the site, it's a legal document, you know, so
Yes.
it's a legally binding thing, you know. So
Mhm.
sometimes, you know, family members do object and stuff, but if that's in place, then it becomes easier for the donor for the OPOs to recover the organs, you know. So
Mhm.
so in my case, that was the situation. And in the hospital, it only happened to be 10 10 minutes away from where I was, you know. So
Oh, wow.
so those things matter too, you know,
Of
because
course.
the cold ischemic time or whatever, you know, that there's for hearts, it's very short, like between 4 to 6 hours, you know. So
Mhm.
everything needs to be done within then. So that mattered. So maybe I'm super lucky, and you know, it's just so that's my story.
Super lucky or super blessed? One or the other, right?
Both. I keep saying I'm extremely lucky, eternally grateful, and completely blessed, you know. So
Beautiful.
yeah,
Beautiful. Well, I'm glad you're here to share your journey. I'm glad you were able to experience those wonderful life moments with your daughters,
thank you.
and you stuck around. I know you
Yeah,
said you were, depressed and you felt basically down.
yeah, exactly. And I had really good support. That's another thing that's critical, you know,
Yes,
in these
definitely.
transplant journeys, you have to have good support because
Yes,
I
100%.
see so much on social media and stuff. There's a lot of people struggling, and it's also because they don't have the support, you know.
Yes.
So yeah,
Another person that had a lot of great support is Charles. I know he always credits his wife, saying that she was
yeah.
there
My wife's my angel.
to
So yeah.
support. Exactly. So support is definitely important. Charles, why don't you share your journey with us?
Sure. Monica is my rock. That's my wife. And Sam, thank you for sharing your story. I think you're
Yes.
going to find that something that a very wise friend of mine told me kind of at the beginning of all this stuff for me is that all of our stories are different, but all of our stories are the same. We
Mhm.
come at it from all different walks of
Yep.
life, all different ways, but we all wind up walking along the same path on this
Mhm.
journey.
Mhm.
100%.
Um,
Yep.
so Mine started at birth. Okay. I was born with a heart condition called HCM, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Didn't know that I had it till I was 17. And kind of going back, my mom had it, her mom had it, but I didn't know any of this until way after the fact. So at 17, I was a midshipman at the United States Naval Academy, went for a run, started getting chest pains. They sent me to do some testing. Testing led to more testing, and eventually found out that's what it was. Since it was my first year, my first semester, then they said, you know, kind of, you got something that can kill you. Be careful, have a nice life. And that was pretty much it.
Wow.
And so I went in at 17. I turned 18 on Boxing Day. And then went back for a few weeks, and then the decision came down. So I was separated, didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and then had to figure that out. Knocked around trying to do a few things and wound up in the restaurant business. I got my first job at 19 as a dishwasher, did that all the way up until 36. I was working for a restaurant company back home in Atlanta. I was born and raised in Georgia.
Wow.
And when I left the company that I was working for, I was hiring managers for the company. I'd done some interviews that day at the store in Athens, Georgia, and then got on the road to go back home, wound up having a massive stroke out of nowhere, no warning, anything like that. Knocked me off my feet for 14 months. And at that time, I was married to a girl from Ontario, and we figured that the stroke was just the beginning of the really bad stuff that could happen because of the HCM. So we figured the best thing for us to do as a family would be to move close to her folks, her family, which was here in Ontario. We moved here in the summer of 2006, just in case something happened to me, then she and the kids would be surrounded by the largest support network available. So we got up here in the summer of 2006, got a cardiologist almost immediately. He said, as soon as I told him about the HCM, I said, I can tell you two things. There's no cure for it. It never gets any better. Then 3 years later, I went into full-fledged heart failure. And he said, I'm going to start sending you down to Toronto General because they do the heavy lifting on end-stage heart failure. And he said, there's three outcomes with heart failure. Either you get an artificial heart, you get a heart transplant, or you die. I've done all three. And so he was right.
Wow.
And the way it worked was I live in a town called Kitchener, Ontario, about 70 miles west of Toronto. And he said, we're going to basically monitor you here for 6 months, then send you down to Toronto General for 6 months, back and forth like that. So 2009, 2010, I guess I went down to Toronto General for my first kind of check-in with their team, and had a very poor like heart function test. And then they said, you know, we're really going to keep close eyes on you. Well, kind of like you were saying, you know, you get used to feeling bad for so long that you don't really notice anything. It's just, this is the way I'm supposed to feel.
Day, right.
So it took all the way until January of 2015. I went in for a regular checkup. Much like you, I didn't get to go home for 100 days. Doctor did a stress test, and they said, yeah, your heart's done. It's time for you to get a transplant. Then they did a second test that showed there was so much pressure built up inside my chest that it was unsafe for me to receive a transplant. So in my case, it was bad enough that they had to do something. They couldn't just let me wait because my heart had worn out to the point that it was done. And they wouldn't let me go home because I found out later that they felt that if I went home, I wouldn't live long enough to come back for a follow-up appointment. So they decided to give my heart a helper, which was an LVAD, which you mentioned before, left ventricular assist device. That was surgery, went 8 days after I was admitted. And then everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong.
That's a tough surgery. I mean, yeah.
Died twice on the table. They brought me back from flatline. And then you mentioned infections. They got me out of surgery, and then they couldn't stop the bleeding when they were trying to close me up. So they gave me transfusion. finally got me stabilized into recovery. Then they realized I'd suffered 2 major complications. First was I caught an infection from all that blood in, blood out. And that led to another that kept me down in CVICU for almost 7 weeks. There wasn't a person thought I was going to get out of that hospital alive, but I did. Second major complication was because of all that blood loss, my kidneys ran dry for too long. They wound up dying. So they hoped that right after surgery, they put me on hemodialysis right away, that might boost my kidneys and get them going again, but it never did. So I was on dialysis all the way from January of 2015 till October of 2017 when I wound up getting a kidney transplant. So that was just kind of the icing on the cake. Wow. The main focus was still with the heart. So after I got out of CVICU back up to the regular floor, I am, living with a heart that runs on electricity. I literally.
Yeah, those batteries.
Yeah. 5-hour lifespan, 2 14-volt lithium ion batteries I wore in an old fisherman's vest. And then when I went to sleep at night, I'd plug myself into a wall unit, and then the wall unit was plugged into, the wall just like a lamp. And then did all that. Exactly 100 days, I was discharged. Got to come home for 3 weeks. Got the phone call. They said, Mr. Cook, we need you to come back in for further testing and observation. We've been following your blood work. There's a substance in your blood called LDH that keeps going up and up and up. We need to figure out why. So went back down to the hospital over the course of a week, bunch of tests, basically process of elimination. They said the only thing that can be causing this increase in your LDH is the pump that we just put inside your chest. Now, the only way they can find out, because they can't scan it from the outside because the pump is metal, is to take it out, open it up, and see what's going on. Well,
I'm going to stop you right there. 1 second, Charles. What is going through your mind? Like all this stuff, everything that's happened. I know Sam said what he experienced, but what's going through your mind at this point? Like everything that's going on, they put this pump in there. You're thinking, okay, everything's turning around. And all of a sudden, oh, sorry, there might be an issue with the pump. You got to bring it back in. How are you feeling? What's going through your mind? Are you going through a bout of depression as well? What's happening?
No depression. I was more anger and frustration because when I woke up in recovery after being down in CVICU, it was funny that you mentioned the Super Bowl, because before I went into surgery, it was the playoffs. That was the year that Seattle played New England. And then I missed Pete Carroll's call about
2015,
why wouldn't you run, Marshawn instead of trying to throw it? Exactly. It was crazy. And I'm like, what? When I woke up. But literally when I woke up in the bed, I had that electrical cord hanging out of my belly, like I described. And then I saw these 2 tubes, coming out of my chest, going in this machine I've never seen before. And there was some red stuff in it. I'm kind of, that looks like blood. Is that my blood? What's going on? And then they explained it to me that unfortunately I had, lost my kidney function during surgery. And now I was on dialysis. I was just mad. I was like, you operated on my heart. That's in my chest. My kidneys are in my back. How did that happen? And why didn't you guys tell me? I had no idea that they were even at risk. So I was angry and frustrated, and then wanting to get out of the hospital. I'd been in the hospital for 100 days by the time I finally got discharged. And I was just, I'm ready to go home. There's no reason, to keep me here anymore. I've been here long enough.
And hospitals are no fun to stay in.
Not at all.
The hospital is no place to get well.
Exactly.
So, which I quickly found out. The other thing was, I figured once I got discharged, I'd been there for so long, then I'm just going to go back to my life, and I couldn't do a fraction of what I'd done before. And that was the big lesson that I learned, is once you get discharged from the hospital, it doesn't mean that you're well. It just means you're well enough to go home.
Yes.
So you got to cut yourself some slack and set realistic expectations about what you can do and how long it's going to take you to get back. So
absolutely,
that's what I was thinking, Jeannine. That's what's going through my head. And actually, I was getting relieved, because the first 2 weeks, I'd been saying, hey, I want to go home, just like you were saying. And they were like, we can't discharge you from our dialysis unit,
Yeah.
we have to send you to another dialysis unit, which was Grand River here in Kitchener. So I said, all right, that's great. Well, the Grand River people had never had an LVAD patient before. So they actually came up the last week I was in the hospital. My schedule was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They came on the Wednesday and watched me do dialysis. And then it was kind of cool because afterwards, I think they sent like 7 people from the team. So we had
So
kind of
you're
like
educating them? Is
Right,
that what's going
exactly.
on?
Well, they
right.
needed to because this
They
was going
needed
to be a
to be,
team
yeah.
effort. And
Wow.
so I was basically at the end of it, I'll take care of my heart, my LVAD with my spare batteries and my little video camera
Right.
bag that I carry around. You guys worry about the dialysis. That's what you know. This LVAD is stuff I know. So they left on Wednesday, and the plan was they leave on Wednesday. I get discharged on Thursday, come home, and then start dialysis at Grand River on Friday. And they're, bye, Charles. Great. We'll see you on Friday. I'm like, all right, this is cool. I'm getting out of here, man. This is fantastic. Thursday morning, my nurse practitioner comes into my room and she said, unfortunately, Grand River said they can't take you. And I was like, what? I just blew it. My mind, I was so mad. I'm like, this makes no sense. Did they give you any reason? Like, no, they just left a message.
Oh my
I'm
God.
like, we need to find out what's going on with this because I cannot stay here. There's no reason for me to stay in this hospital. I
Not
want
another
to go home.
day, right?
Yeah. And so basically they came up with a plan that at the time seemed great, but looking back now was completely foolish because this is what we said. They said, okay, you are well enough to be discharged. You can go home to Kitchener. And what the deal is we will basically give you a day pass. So you have to do dialysis Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Grand River can't take you. So you're going to have to still be our dialysis patient as an outpatient. So here's the schedule. I get out, I guess, on Thursday, come home, and then Monica is working on King Street in Waterloo. She was an esthetician at the time. So she would get up in the morning, drive me to Toronto. I had second shift dialysis. So we had to leave early enough for her to drive to Toronto, drop me off, drive back to Waterloo, work her shift, then come back and pick me up when I got done at 5 o'clock.
It's 4 hours, right? Or more? Was it 4 hours?
Oh yeah, dialysis.
Dialysis, yeah.
I would go on at, between 12:30 and 1 and then get done at like 5:30. And then we got to fight that traffic coming back.
That's at least an hour.
Exactly.
Back and forth for driving.
Oh, at 5 o'clock, please.
Wait,
It's going to be more, right?
Please.
when you said 4 hours, I thought you were talking about
Oh, your
total
traffic.
drive time.
No, he's talking about how long I was
The
sitting on
actual
the machine.
dialysis section.
Yeah,
No, but
dialysis run is 4 hours long.
The drive time both ways
Must be
It's
around
about 4 hours.
about 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
As someone who's made that drive many times,
Yes,
it's a 2-hour drive each direction.
there you go.
Yeah.
Depending upon the time of the day, for
And
sure.
then you had kids at home, right? So she had to.
No, that was from my first wife.
Okay.
Okay. So, but they do play a part in this. So that was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, doing that drive back and forth dialysis. And then on Thursday, we had to go down because that's the day to check my LVAD. So 4 days a week, we're doing that. And then we did that for 2 weeks. The third week, they say, hey, you can come here, to Grand River. So the first day, and I'm using Mobility Plus because I'm in no shape to drive. But I go in and I meet the head of the nephrology department. And the first question was, how did this happen? And he said, well, I never expected you to come here because I was going on vacation for 2 weeks. And apparently the message never got to anybody else because that would have made sense. It's like, hey, 2 weeks, you stay in the hospital, then, we started Grand River or something. We could have come up with a better plan. But I was just, this is not cool. And he apologized for it. And he said, we just start from here. And we got to be great friends by the time the whole thing was over. But those 2 weeks almost broke Monica and I, but they actually made us because we figured if we could get through that, then there's nothing that we can't handle.
Wow.
So then, so that third week I go Monday, Grand River, Wednesday, Grand River, Friday, Grand River, back home, sitting on the couch, sun's coming through the window. I'm like, I did it. This is what it's supposed to be like. Phone rings.
Oh,
That's
no.
when we pick back up. Toronto General, we need you to come back in for further testing and observation. Go back down there, do that for a week, all the tests, figuring out what it is. All right, the only thing it can be is that LVAD we put in your chest. We need to check it out. Only way to do it is to take it out, which means another surgery because it has to be replaced because they take it out, I die.
Yep.
LVAD 2 is what I call the second surgery. Went off with flying colors, not a problem at all. And then before leaving the operating room, my surgeon opened it up, took a picture with a cell phone so he could show it to me and explain. He's like, there's just a big glob of like reddish grayish stuff that looked like jelly that was going to clog it up, and it stops. I stop. I'm done. Not sitting here talking to you tonight.
Yeah.
And, that was it. Because I was arguing, I haven't felt this good in years. This thing is working great. It can't be that. And, good thing they didn't listen to me, but they went in and they changed it. And so then that was LVAD 2. Okay. And remember, the twofold purpose of me having the LVAD, one was to keep me alive,
Right.
because my heart, couldn't do the work that it was supposed to do anymore. So the pump and the LVAD took care of that. And number two, they figured that once proper blood flow was restored to my body, the pressures in my chest would come down, making it safe for me to receive a transplant.
Yeah.
They put me on the waiting list and away we go. Now, that first LVAD didn't have a chance to work because it was only in me, for I guess 100 days plus 3 weeks. Then we did it all again. So then 3 months later, they redid all the testing, pressures had come down, and they're like, hey, you're good to go on the list. All right, good deal. They said, because of your blood type, which is O positive, O people can give to anybody, but we can only accept O ourselves.
It's tough to get those matches.
That's right. So they said you can expect to wait 2 to 3 years for your heart. And I'm like, that's good. I'm alive. I made it through this
and
first
you had
LVAD,
the LVAD, so yeah.
So I'm getting used to walking around with my battery packs during the day, plugging myself in at night to go to sleep.
You were used
2
to
years,
it.
I can do that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then all I'm worrying about is doing my dialysis, which I absolutely hated in-center dialysis because it made me feel so bad. On the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I just felt like a wrung out dish rag every time I would come home. Yeah. Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Those are recovery days, basically.
Exactly. All I'm doing is trying to gather up enough strength to go back in the next day and make myself feel bad all over again. Somewhere during this second LVAD, one of the cardiac doctors said, I bet you'd be a perfect candidate for home hemo. And, I kind of had a poker face when he said it, to the outside world, but inside I'm going, man, you must be crazy. I'm just getting used to living on batteries with this LVAD, plugging myself in at night to go to sleep. Now you want me to learn how to run a dialysis machine?
That takes training. Yeah,
exactly. I don't think so. But the good thing was that they have to come out, do a site inspection for your plumbing, for your electrical, all that stuff, and which they did. And then all this takes time. And then by the time they finally came back to me and said, we need you to make a decision, yes or no, are you going to try this? And I was like, hey, anything's got to be better than what I'm
going
doing.
In, right?
Because, I was running on somebody else's schedule. They were always, I had to be ready in half an hour ahead of when they were supposed to come and pick me up if they were early, and they never were. But then they were always late bringing me home, and I'm just sitting there in the waiting room, just like, oh, this is terrible. So at least I figured I could do it on my schedule.
Yes.
So I said, yes, we're going to give this home hemo a try. And it was a 5 to 6 week training program, depending upon how quickly you picked it up. And I went that first day, and I was the most skeptical person, in the room. And the first day, you just kind of do just like in-center dialysis. The nurse does everything for you. And I'm kind of watching all the stuff. And I'm like, that looks pretty technical. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this. But I stuck with it. And by that Friday, because we went Monday through Friday, I had the weekends off. I was like, you know what? If I listen to what they're telling me, learn what I'm supposed to learn, I bet you there's a pretty good chance that I can get the hang of this. So, I stuck with it. I had great instructors. And that 5th week, early in the week, they said, we're thinking about sending you home next week. And I said, I feel pretty good about that. So they said, all right, this is our plan. On that Friday, they said, go home, enjoy the weekend, come back on Monday. We'll do one final check run with you, watch you do everything, make sure you're doing it all right. We'll have a machine delivered to your house. Tuesday, a nurse will come out with you. You guys will do your first home hemo session together. You do well with that. Then Wednesday, you're going to start flying solo on your home hemo career. I said, all right, y'all have a good weekend, happy Friday, all that good stuff. I go home, and Monica gets up on Saturday morning. I get up, I make the bed, phone rings. Mr. Cook, it's Toronto General. We think we got a heart for you. Why don't you come on down? Now, this is only 9 months later. And I literally sat down on the bed and I said,
You were ready to wait. Yeah.
are you telling me the truth? Is this call legit?
Yeah.
And she said, I assure you that I'm telling you the truth. This call is legitimate. We need you to get down here as quickly and safely as possible. And that was it. And I said, okay. And so I'm all cool on the phone.
On the
okay,
verge
boom.
of starting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then I called Monica's work, and of course she's in with a client at the time. And so I'm talking to the receptionist, like, she's not available right now. And I said, well, I need to get a hold of her. And this is literally a matter of life and death.
Literally.
And she said, okay, I'll get her. And so I hang up the phone. And then a few minutes later, Monica calls back. She slipped a note under the door of the room, and Monica called me back. And I was like, we just got a call. Oh my God, I got to go, and I'm all not cool at all. So when I left home, my best friend had given me a journal. We've been friends since I was 11 years old. And I told him that I was going to save that journal. And whenever it came time for me to get my heart, then I would write something, just between he and I in it and save it for him. So I grabbed one of those old reusable, like, grocery bags, like from Zayre's or whatever, the black bag. I threw that thing in there, and then I grabbed some underwear and some socks, and I didn't know what to do. And I was just running back and forth between rooms. So I just sat down and waited for Monica to get home. She got home, and then seems like 2 minutes later, her mom and dad came over. Here are our animals. These are the instructions. We got to go. So we took off, and I didn't remember it, but she reminded me later that I drove myself down to the hospital.
Wow.
And because I could see that I would be driving her crazy in the passenger seat, like, are we there yet? What's taking so long? So I drove, and that helped me stay calm. And
Yes.
I actually had got to the point in my mind that, like, this isn't going to happen. This is my dress rehearsal. They're going to call me down there, and they're going to say, sorry, Mr. Cook, you're not right for the heart today, or the heart's not right for you.
Right.
But just going home, keep doing what you're doing. And, and I was, that's what I was prepared for.
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
wasn't prepared for was everything to go through on the first shot, which it did. I remember getting to the hospital, going into the admissions office, getting my blue hospital card that we used at the time, my health card, and then I blacked everything out. I don't remember anything else until I woke up in recovery with somebody else's heart in my chest. And Monica said 12 hours.
Wow.
Monica said that, yeah, they took you back to a room. All the team came in, talked to you, asked if you had any questions. You guys had a good conversation. And then they took you off at about 7 o'clock that night. And then 7 o'clock the next morning, they came to get her and say, surgery went well. He survived, and that was it. So I celebrate both days now, and they're also in April, just like you, Sam.
What day?
So
What day?
23rd and 24th.
Ooh, so close.
Exactly.
And what year was that?
I just hit 7 this past month.
Awesome.
So,
we're like connected.
Exactly. So congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah.
Wow, awesome. What a journey.
I know. And the thing is, I've heard your journey before, but I feel like every time I hear it, it's something new that, I don't remember hearing that the last time you told that story. Like, it's always
I think that's how it is with all of us. I mean, when I tell my story, some other stuff comes up, and it's almost like a new story, but because there's so much that went on,
Exactly. And I enjoy telling it, because every time I do tell it, it reminds me of how blessed I am to be here, able to tell it. And it's my belief that the only people who have the really bad stories were the ones who didn't live to tell them. you know.
Yeah.
So with all that crazy stuff, I'll never say, you know, I had a bad time, because I'm here to tell about it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Very
I
happy.
run a lot of support groups and stuff like that, you know, and often we just do a moment of silence for all the
Mhm.
people who don't make it, or you know, they get the transplant even, and then they have issues, and
Yes.
it
Exactly.
doesn't last very long, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know what the statistics are in Canada, but do they still measure on like 1 year and 3
Oh yeah.
years, 5 years? What do they do?
Well, the thing was, so here's, and this is my big thing nowadays, and going forward for the next, you know, the next little part of my life, is talking about the mental side of transplant.
Yes,
Okay, that's something that we never discuss
and
enough.
they don't prep you for that ever.
No, well, they can't, you know.
They
Yes.
they don't even tell you much about what happens when you go home the
Right.
first day. You know, they
Absolutely.
just don't. Here too. So
That's actually one
So,
of my questions. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Charles.
so I was going to say, you know, I've talked about this a lot lately. May is Mental Health Month.
mhm.
One of the things, you know, for May
Oh,
is
yeah, there's so many things in May.
yeah, exactly. You know, there's only 12 months, and there's so many different
Right.
things that everybody wants to talk about. But when I woke up in recovery, the first thing I thought was, I'm alive.
Mhm.
Thank you, God, you got me through another one. And then I thought, I'm alive because I have
Because
someone else's heart in my chest.
Mhm.
And I've never felt so thankful, so humble, and so unworthy all at the same time.
Mhm.
And I broke down and started crying. I was thankful because I was alive.
Yeah.
I was humble because I was alive, not by my own doing. It was something I couldn't do to help myself.
Mhm.
And
Because of
then I
someone
felt
else.
unworthy because I was supposed to be waiting 2 to 3 years. 9 months, I'm getting
Mhm.
this heart. People die
Yes.
waiting on the
Really good.
transplant list.
Mhm.
Why did I get this when somebody else didn't? There's no way that I'm more worthy than anybody else.
Mhm.
And
It
it
was your
wasn't until,
time. It was your time.
yeah, you know, that's
That's it.
kind of what I've come to grips with.
Yes.
But I also found out that I wasn't supposed to get this heart. Here they do
Were
a
you
primary,
backup? Were you
secondary.
backup?
Yeah,
You were
but they never
backup.
told me that. You know,
Mhm.
another
Right.
thing that I was not aware of. Normally, they have a primary and a secondary anytime a heart becomes
Mhm,
available,
mhm.
because it's such a valuable organ. There
Yes.
aren't enough to go around. They don't
Yes.
want it to go to waste. So they have
Exactly.
2 people. If it doesn't work out with the first one, then they'll have the
Mhm.
second one right there. I was never told any of that, but I found out, actually, Monica found out and told me that the primary was sick that day. And
Mhm.
so it went to me because I was the next closest match.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
then, you know, which is probably good that I didn't know it at that time, because I was having enough
Exactly.
trouble dealing with it
Exactly.
anyway.
Exactly.
But
That's
something
why they
that you,
don't tell you. If you're
yeah,
the second backup, they won't.
well, here
Not,
they do.
yeah.
Here they do, because I've had friends who've gone in and said I was a secondary or whatever kind of thing. And, you know, I was like, okay, they never talked to me about any of that.
Mm.
But what you said was how I got right with it, was because I was that way for weeks. I'd break down, start crying every time I thought about this gift, and I'm not worthy of this, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But I finally just had a conversation with myself in the mirror in the wee hours of the morning and said, actually, I did 2 things. One, I was part of a group called LDAA, Life Donation Awareness Association, where my very wise friend told me that all of our stories are different. All of our stories are the same. And I had written an email to them just saying, hey, have any of you guys ever experienced these type of emotions, these thoughts, this, you know, kind of
Mhm.
weird feelings? And I never sent it. I
Mhm.
wrote it, and then I just went and talked to myself in the mirror, and I said, you got to get a hold of yourself, figure out some way to deal with this, or else you're going to need to get professional help.
Mhm.
And what I tried to do was put myself in the mindset of the person who had donated their heart, because to me, this had to be an individual who, with their final wishes, wanted to do something to help somebody else have a chance at a better life.
Exactly.
I became the beneficiary of that goodwill, somebody they didn't even know.
Mhm.
And to me, that was the ultimate form of paying it forward. You know, you give somebody a gift that you know that they can't pay back. And so when
We
my
got to find
mind
other ways to pay it
looked at
back.
it that
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
I decided to live my life to honor my donor and their family by doing whatever I could to pay it forward for all the patients coming along behind me. And
Exactly.
that has driven everything that I've done since then. that's why we're sitting here tonight,
Mhm.
Yep.
because hopefully somebody who listens to this, watches this, sees you or I or Jeannine or Chris, says, hey, I can identify with that. They're talking about stuff that's important to me.
Yes.
And if those folks can do it, they found a way to deal with it, then I can do that too.
Exactly.
And that's me in a nutshell,
And we have that in common too, Charles.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
so I also cried a lot at the drop of a hat. I'd be,
Mhm.
and part of that is drugs like prednisone and stuff. So
Yep.
Mhm.
it plays with your emotions. I mean, I keep saying it's like PMS is like the mildest form. This
Yeah.
mood swing from prednisone is like crazy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You hallucinate. And we were on pain meds too, like Dilaudid and all
Mhm.
that stuff. So I was hallucinating constantly. I'd have conversations, and then my wife would walk into the room. I said, "You heard that, right?" She's like, "No."
Yeah.
And I'd have arguments, and there was
Mhm.
nobody in the room. So all those weird things, and then like Charles was talking about, so a lot of people have this so-called survivor's guilt,
Yes.
so
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
I chose to believe that this individual was very sick, and lucky for me they had registered to be a
Mhm.
donor, and lucky
Yes.
for me they had told their families they wanted to be a donor, and so it's not like that person died for me. That
Yes.
person did die.
Yes.
You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? They did die. They were going to
Absolutely.
die. And I was lucky and blessed to get it. And because maybe there's a purpose in life for me that
Yes.
hasn't come forward yet, So
Wanna-
I have that opportunity now. I don't know what the purpose is, but there's something.
Mhm.
No, you are absolutely right. And that is huge, huge, huge
Yeah.
to
It's
everybody
hard
out
to
there.
look at it that way. It's hard to
Yes.
look at it that way.
And I'm glad that you said that. And it took me a while, and somebody had to tell me that. And I try to share that as well with other patients, because there is that guilt. But one of the things that I did was with LDAA, I would go to up here instead of the DMV. It's Service Ontario here in Ontario,
Okay.
where you
Yes.
get your license and your health card, and they ask you if you want to be a donor,
Sure.
when you renew those. And I used to go every April and set up a little table and give out green,
Sure.
organ donation ribbons, and share my
Mhm.
story. And, just say, hey, when somebody like you says yes, then that allows somebody like me to sit here and say, thank you. That's
Thank
why
you.
I'm here.
Yeah.
And the
Exactly.
very first time I went there, a guy came up to me and said, I'm glad you're here, but it's too bad somebody had to die for you to be here.
I've heard that. Yeah.
And so I fortunately had that conversation, said, no, they didn't die because of me. I did not cause them to die.
Correct.
I'm the
Exactly.
good thing that came out of their death.
Exactly.
And, that I want to share to every transplant recipient listening to this tonight, is to know that you didn't do anything at all. You didn't ask for this. None of us asked for
Exactly.
this, but you received that gift. And to me, I need to do something with it. I have to
Mhm.
pay it forward, because I can never pay it back.
We need to honor that gift, in whatever
Absolutely.
way possible. And I've talked to several like donor family members, like at these flag raisings and stuff. Another donor mom was speaking as well, so I spoke to her, and she was like, the way I see it, the way she sees it is a part of her son was a type 1 diabetic,
Mhm.
right? And so normally when we register to be donors and stuff, you hear a lot of people, oh, I'm too sick, I can't donate anything, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah,
Yeah.
right? But this guy, this amazing hero, he was type 1 diabetic all his life. And when he passed away, he was able to donate, save 4 lives, and plus tissues and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
so she was saying, I just look at it like part of him is living in all the recipients,
Yes. Yes.
and she's met a few of the recipients of those, of the organs. So it's amazing. Even some of the donor families, and donor families are amazing. I mean,
Oh, please.
what they go through,
Absolutely.
the grief. I mean, we can't
Mhm.
even imagine, right? Most of the time, it's not older people and stuff like that, right? Most of the
Mhm.
time, it's someone's child or someone's, and especially pediatric stuff. I can't even imagine that stuff, but like 11-year-old people who die and give their
Mhm.
liver to somebody, and
Mhm.
so it's amazing, so. But definitely what I identify with Charles, what he was saying about, you got to think of it as truly a gift. It was
Exactly.
it was meant to, it's like, it is a miracle. I mean,
It
Gift
is.
of life.
Absolutely.
no short of miracle,
Yeah.
so that's,
I'm going to ask a question.
Yeah.
Now, Charles, and you, like I said, you both had a heart transplant. In terms of medication, is the medication the same, whether it's in the States or if it's Canada? Do you take the same meds? And talk to me about cost.
I doubt the medication, because all different, heart failure is so it covers a whole big spectrum, so
Mhm.
like even Charles must have been on a lot of meds even before. Like
Mhm.
I was on several. I mean, like meds were keeping me alive, right?
Mhm.
So after my transplant, I was on 57 different kinds of meds,
Wow.
including insulin. So, but now I'm on 12. I can like
Mhm.
less than 10 actually. So, but yeah. So most of the medicine depends on the insurance. Most meds are covered,
Okay.
at least for the first year. So, and then the costly ones are the immunosuppressant drugs.
Mhm.
I don't know which ones you guys have, but I'm on Prograf and Cellcept.
Mhm.
And I'm lucky and blessed again because I'm on a very small dosage of
Okay.
both of them. Like Charles, I don't know about you, but I'm on like 0.5 times 2 a day.
Mhm.
So that's 1 milligram of Prograf or tacrolimus,
Mhm.
and Cellcept or mycophenolate. I'm only on 250 times 2. So I'm lucky there. I know that because a lot of people are a lot more. I used to be on a lot higher dosages, but
Mhm.
that was pretty much, if you're stable and you're like here, we have a lot of biopsies initially. I don't know, Charles, how many you had, but I had several, like maybe
Mhm.
12 or 13, like almost every month, they
Mhm.
do biopsies and they're invasive. They go in and take a little piece of the heart.
That's it.
And it's risky.
Yeah.
They could bust something else while they're
Mm.
doing that. You got to sign every time. Fatal,
You
could
know
be
how much
fatal.
the cost would be for something like that if it's
Well,
not, is that
biopsies
even
are in
covered?
the range like over $6,000-7,000 each time.
Wow.
But I mean,
Wow.
obviously not the patient, but it costs the insurance at least that
Mhm.
much.
And what about the
Um,
medication that you just mentioned? If
The
you're
other
paid
medications
pocket
too,
for that.
they're costly. Like, but manufacturers sometimes for the first year will give a rebate or a discount, or if your insurance doesn't cover it, they'll give
Mhm.
you a break. Because
Mhm.
they know this is a lifetime drug. They have you.
Yes.
So they can give it away for all they care.
Yeah.
But most of the time it is based on insurance, and if it's the government insurance, Medicare, they cover it. If you had your
Mhm.
transplant while you have that coverage, it's going to be covered. So the
You're good.
hospital stay. So my whole transplant, I believe, was $1.5 million.
Wow. Wow.
Because they do send you the bills, even though I didn't have to pay that much,
They still
obviously.
show you the
They still
numbers.
want
show
you to
you
know how good they are to
every
you.
single
Mm.
line is
Yeah.
charged. Every single thing is a line item.
Mhm.
They give you a swab, or they give you a piece of cotton wool. It's
They
on
show
there.
you.
It's
What
billed.
about you,
It's
Charles? Like
worse than lawyers and stuff.
in
So
terms of the cost of your medication, Charles, if you didn't have, insurance and you pay out of pocket, what are we looking at approximately?
Well, let's start with the number first. It would be right after my transplant, I was 23 medications. I'm down to 15 now.
Beautiful.
Prograf and prednisone are pretty much the only anti-rejection medications I have to still take.
are you
I
still on
was on,
prednisone too? A
yeah,
little bit?
yeah,
5
just
mg or something?
0.5.
Yeah, 0.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I do, let's see, 3.5 milligrams twice a day of the Prograf.
Okay.
Mhm.
So then that's, just
But
kind
it's
of a
been
maintenance
stable, right?
dose.
Your
Yeah, exactly.
levels have been good.
Yep, exactly. And with the biopsies, you start off doing one a week
Mhm.
for
Yeah, exactly.
however long. Then it goes to every 2 weeks.
Every
Then
3
it
weeks
goes
and then a
to a
month.
month.
Yeah.
Yep. And then for years, I was doing basically every 3 months, I was
Right.
doing a biopsy.
Mhm, mhm.
Mhm.
And then up until 5 years, where I did, I guess 4th year, I did 6 months. And then
Right.
at 5 years, they stop up here. They don't do biopsies anymore, which I was
Wow.
surprised. They said basically, if you're going to have rejection, it's going to be within the first 5 years. So after 5, unless
Mm.
there's some reason for us to do one, then we don't. So
Mhm.
That's pretty good. I mean, so how
Yeah.
stressful were those biopsies? Because I remember being stressed each time because you're hoping that there's no rejection each time.
exactly. Well, you
And
always have that. It's always in the back of
it's
your
always
mind.
there, but
Yeah.
at the time of the biopsy, that's when you're waiting. It's like, cross it, just wait and pray and make sure there's
Yeah,
0 or 1, or
right.
then you keep track, like it's like a score sheet.
Exactly.
13-0, and all this stuff. Luckily for me, there was 0 rejection, throughout, and then
Mhm.
now, so they also became less frequent, right? But
Right.
mine stopped, and then COVID came into the play, so I basically didn't have a biopsy at all during the whole 3 years.
Mhm.
So it had stopped earlier, and then we have this blood test now, which tests the biomarkers. So it's also expensive, but it basically gives you an idea of how likely you are to have rejection,
Mhm.
and it's early detection. So if the numbers aren't right, then they go do a biopsy,
Exactly.
so which is good, because I don't want to go through that whole risky thing any more than I have to,
Of course.
plus the dyes and all this stuff is going to make my kidneys go worse.
Mhm.
So now they have different kinds of dyes, I guess, that go through your body quicker, but any dye and stuff. And I have stage 3 kidney disease. It's been compromised because I still have diabetes from even
Mhm.
before my transplant. How about you, Charles? Do you have to deal with diabetes after?
I had to. Mine is currently in remission, but it
Okay.
was caused by high doses of prednisone,
Prednisone,
which
right?
Yes.
they
Yeah.
were using to treat a
Exactly.
lung disease that had been caused by one of my other transplant medications.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
yeah,
And then you were fine through COVID, right? There was no complications, luckily.
no, knock on wood.
Charles, do you know
Yeah,
how much the hospital, like you were in the hospital for, like you said, 100 days and
Yeah,
etc. Do you know how much the hospital cost would have if you were paying out of pocket, or like
I
approximately?
have no idea,
Mhm.
but that $1 million for the transplant sounds about right. That seemed like
Wow.
a number that was thrown around for
Yeah.
the
So
actual
for
surgery.
hospital stays, I can tell you, my wife was not even in the hospital for a transplant. She was there for like a bowel resectioning surgery. 11
Mhm.
days, 58,000
Mhm.
in the hospital. So it's expensive. It's expensive,
Wow.
and of course, insurance picked up most of that. And then we had good insurance. So, but definitely, and I feel bad because so many people can't afford.
Yes,
You
it's true.
see on social media, you'll see GoFundMe's and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And then there's complications, right? Some people have to go to different centers far away.
Mhm.
So insurance doesn't cover those kind of things, staying overnight or, travel and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Usually, I don't know about you guys, but here insurance doesn't cover that stuff.
Yeah.
So if you have to go to another center far away, it's on
Mhm.
you.
Mhm.
So that's why people do GoFundMe's and stuff like that. Like, what's the equivalent of what we have here as UNOS, the United Network for Organ Sharing?
Mhm.
What is there equivalent in Canada for that? The organization that manages the wait list, is there a
Yeah,
body?
it's Trillium Gift of
Trillium.
Life Network
Okay,
here
so
in
they're the
Ontario.
ones who make the offers to the transplant centers, and they're the ones who track who's sick and what category they are and stuff like that, right?
I
So I
Exactly.
see.
mean, here there's a lot of heat on UNOS because they're a contractor, and they want them removed and all this stuff. But it's all these other things too that are going on. The transplant centers, there's a
Mhm.
lot of organ, I would say, underutilization. People call it
Mhm.
wastage, or I don't want to say that because it's a live organ.
Of course.
We're not gonna say, have to give it some respect. So underutilization, where they'll refuse, and people in this country often, especially for kidney, they refuse a lot.
Mhm.
Because they're offered various, the KDPI is this much or that much or whatever, all the numbers that they look at, and they're like, I don't want that one. That's a little
Mhm.
too. I don't want that one. I'll wait for another one. So some people reject a lot.
Wow.
So and I'm thinking in my case, I even agreed to like take a high risk organ, and we
Mhm.
have those as well.
Mhm.
So if someone had Hep C or anything like that, because there's treatments for it. One of
Yeah,
the
we call it expanded criteria up here.
expanded criteria. So
Yeah.
here, there's actually a pretty famous transplant heart surgeon, Dr. Montgomery. He does heart surgeries, and he himself needed a heart transplant. So
Mhm.
he elected to accept a high risk organ, and he got in a high Hep C one. He ended
Mhm.
up getting Hep C. He ended up being
Wow.
treated for it, and now he's performing the surgeries again, and stuff like that. So
Wow.
it's amazing, and even if like even if someone might have been incarcerated for like a month, that might be in that category, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, because you don't know what happens, when you're in prison, and you don't, if they don't know the full history, when the donor families are interviewed, sometimes they ask all kinds of questions like,
Yes.
was your loved one here, there, or, all that stuff. And if
Mhm.
they don't know all the details, they're going to fall into the high risk one,
Yes.
so it's always, so I tell people to like go ahead and open it up because it's a gift, right?
Mhm.
There's no guarantees ever,
Yes.
like you may get, I know so many people, and you do too, probably, Charles, 30 years with a heart,
Mhm.
20 plus years. I mean, a lot of them were transplanted when they were kids, but
Mhm.
like one of my, really good mentors, I mean, he got his heart at 57, and he recently passed away. It was
Mm.
29 years.
Wow.
So he was just about in his 80s, so it's amazing, and that's the other thing, we can do everything right sometimes, but I don't know if you guys read that New York Times op-ed recently, right? There was this two-time heart recipient. She's a writer, and she wrote about how transplant patients go through the whole process. Tough thing to do. They do everything right, the C word, they're compliant,
Mhm. Mm.
because we have to be compliant. If you're not compliant, bad things will happen. So
Yes.
she was just talking about it was a very well-written article, but it was kind of talking about how we go through everything, and then we have these immunosuppressant drugs that cause cancer,
Yes.
that cause other damage, and stuff like that. So either way, you die. But I'm like,
Mhm.
well, first of all, I'm still blessed because,
Of course.
and this individual, I think her first heart lasted 25 years,
Wow.
and she got a second one, so she's double blessed.
That's
And,
beautiful.
so she actually passed away last week. So,
Hmm.
because she had cancer.
Okay. Okay.
So she passed away so most of the transplant recipients don't pass away from the organ
That's over.
failure. It's
Yes.
usually something else. And
Mhm.
plus it's natural, right? Over time, you're going to age, you're going to get other health issues, stuff
Mhm.
like that. Nothing's forever. I mean,
Of course. Of course.
so I just keep telling people, yes, that'll happen. And people are talking about how there hasn't been much advancement. There's been a ton of advancement. Now they can keep organs perfused, and they can almost like clean it up and
Mhm.
use it, and so yeah, the improvements are needed all over. I'd like to see drones
Yeah.
deliver organs and stuff like that,
Be a
but
lot faster.
exactly, and then then they worry about, oh, someone left the organ in the bathroom, or
Yeah.
wasn't delivered in good shape. There were tire marks on the kidney, and
Oh my
all these
gosh.
stories you hear, right? But I'm like, those are like far and few between. So,
Mhm.
but in the US, they celebrated 1 million transplants, right? This last
Beautiful.
year. So there was a big campaign, 1 million, and we're going to do 1 million more. When you think
Mhm.
about it, it's not a lot, but it's significant though. 1
Yes.
million is
It's
quite
a
a
lot
big
of
deal.
lives saved.
It's a lot of lives
Yeah, it's a
saved,
lot to those
and
million
Yeah.
people and
and
their
that's
families.
exactly. So I'm one of
Yeah,
those million, and it's
Yes.
just
exactly.
not me, it's my
Mhm.
family who benefits,
Hmm.
right? And other people, whoever else got organs from this donor, they
Yes.
also benefited, so it's just overwhelming sometimes, but I'm just so glad and blessed to be here. I can keep talking.
Definitely.
I'm just
Chris, let me ask you a question. You've been quiet. Let me ask you a question. I know you haven't had a transplant or anything, but if you, heaven forbid, were in need for a transplant and you found out that the transplant, the organ is compromised, would you turn around and say, you know what, it's okay, I'll take it? Or would you like, I'm going to wait for something else to come around that's a little bit healthier, for example?
Compromised or high risk?
Sorry, say it again.
Compromised or high risk? 'Cause I think
Yeah.
those are two
Yeah.
different things, right?
Yeah. So let's just say it's compromised.
I think no. Okay, here's what I think. I
Mm.
think there is a profession with experts who make the right decision, and at a time like that, I would lean on their expertise as opposed to
trying to
the
make the
value,
decision.
the
Yeah.
whatever pops into my head.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a
right?
good answer, because, a lot of people don't trust the medical staff and stuff, and they try to take it on their own hands, and then there's no.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons why a lot of people don't trust the medical staff.
Exactly. Yeah,
and
there's
for
a
good
lot of
reason.
reason for sure.
But
Yeah.
if you're asking me, educated the way I'm educated now,
Mhm.
what decision I would make, then yeah, I would lean towards the decisions by the doctor, which if
Mhm.
it's compromised is probably going to be a no.
Yes. Okay.
So what percentage of you said it's a low rate of organ registrations for organ
Registration.
donation, right? What's the
Yes.
percentage overall for you guys in Canada?
I'm not
Like, is
sure.
it really low, like below 40% or something, or?
It just
In
says in
Ontario,
the
it is.
article.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say in Ontario it is. I think we're like
So in
33,
different
34%.
provinces. Mhm.
Yeah. I'm not
Yeah.
sure countrywide.
Mhm.
So most of the US, I mean, at least 58 or 60% are, but many of them don't tell their families, or
Yes.
many of them back out, and stuff like that. And many of them believe in all these myths,
Yes.
like what's going to happen, if I'm in the ER and, I'm sick and they see the little heart in my license, they're not going to save me
Mhm.
because there's somebody
Yep.
waiting in the other room for an organ.
That
you
is,
know?
I mention that all the time. I mention that
Yeah.
all the time. That's one of the myths
Yeah.
that's out
And then
there.
religious reasons too, like some
Yeah.
religions believe in afterlife, right? So
Mhm.
if a kidney, oh my gosh, next life, what's going to happen?
That's it, right?
Mhm.
That there's a lot of myths,
A lot of
surrounding
myths, a lot of
transplant,
myths.
and a lot of lack of knowledge as well, right?
Exactly.
People aren't educated. So I remember you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier on, Sam, that you didn't know a lot, and yourself as well, Charles, that there was not a lot of information, and so now I
But there
feel
was no
that
reason to, like, you don't really think about ever needing a transplant, and
Mhm.
then
yes,
Until
and
you need
then
one.
until you need
exactly,
one. So
exactly.
now it's a mission. Like, now I make sure, like, if I meet people who have heard the word transplant, I'm like,
Mhm.
get on it, get on it, get on it.
Mhm.
Learn, research, join the support groups, talk about it, listen to other stories. I mean, there's similarities for sure, but you learn more. I mean,
Yeah.
and I volunteer a lot with the Donate Life organization here, and
Mhm.
with our OPOs we're able to volunteer too. So in fact, I've been lucky to volunteer with my local OPO. So they have these simulation programs, so they train their staff, their hospital services staff. This is the group of people who actually talk to the donor families, so
Mhm.
they're either convincing them or supporting them in their time of grief. So I've for example played like a father who lost his son. So they
Mhm.
come to me and they ask me, is it okay, if his organs are viable, can we go ahead with the donation? And then I have to, like, role play, I have to
Yeah.
just, like, either say, no, I don't believe in this, I believe in this, or
Mhm.
he always wanted to donate, so yes, go ahead. So all these scenarios you learn about, how you start the discussion on a table, how you get your family to talk about it, and especially for kidney and liver, how
Mhm.
you start to have the conversation about the minute you hear that you may need a transplant or you have kidney damage, you should start talking about it.
Yes.
Like, talk
100%.
about it, because it takes time.
Mhm.
It takes time to convince people. It takes time to even talk about your story. Some people
Yeah.
are so private, or they don't want to, whether they don't want to tell their work or family, whatever, but they don't want to tell anyone. And then you don't, you just haven't been able to ask, whether it's a church or wherever. You just need to be able to ask, because there are
Mhm.
people who will step up,
Yes.
and so yeah, so I just think, it's amazing what I've learned after.
Yes.
So I want to give that knowledge to other people too, because I've learned a lot about the donation side of it, because I've learned that less than 2% of people who are actually in a hospital, in an ICU environment, on a ventilator, are able to donate, right?
Mhm.
If they're registered, if
Mhm.
the family agrees, all those ifs are there. So basically you have this big pool of people who may die in a car crash, right?
Mhm.
Then
Mhm.
it gets narrowed down further to how sick are they? Are they going to be declared brain dead or not? Then that pool becomes smaller. Are they on a ventilator? It becomes even smaller. And then, is the family okay with it? Even smaller. So
Yeah,
it's
other factors.
literally 2% or less,
Mhm,
small number.
mhm,
That's why I feel we're so blessed because, I was one of 3,800 heart transplants that year,
mhm.
right? And so,
That's amazing.
and my hospital, I think, did probably only 200 or 300 that year.
Mhm.
So,
Wow. Well, once again, I'm very happy that you both came on the show to share your journey. And it's an amazing journey. You both look healthy and strong. So like you said, Sam, and like you said, Charles, you're definitely
and we have to
blessed.
meet up, Charles, sometime.
I agree. I was thinking the same
Connected.
thing.
And I'm going to go to Toronto because I have friends there too. So,
Yes,
Come on
definitely.
up.
Exactly. Charles, I'm going to give you the last word. What is it that you want everyone watching this episode to know? What's the last message that you'd like to leave everyone with?
Is that something that Sam said before, and I was just talking to my son about it earlier today, is that no one gets through this journey alone. I like to think that I'm tough and all that, and mentally tough I am. I know that, but I know I wouldn't be here without my son, my daughter, and my wife, Monica. The doctors, the nurses, and even you guys, my
Mhm.
ACB Organ Health YouTube channel. You you helped me along more than you know, just sitting here talking about this, being able to do it and share, and hopefully that I'm doing some good. So if you're out there struggling, know that you're not going through this alone. There are other people out there that are struggling too. None of us did it by ourselves. Don't let your pride get in the way. Find somebody and ask for some help, because there are a lot of folks out there that want to do some good in this world. So give them the
Mhm.
opportunity to do so.
Beautiful.
and
Beautiful. I think
find a
it's
support group or something, because it's really important to be positive throughout the whole thing.
yes.
Because we can be sick, but you can still be positive.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Right on.
Well, this is the time that I would share my nugget of knowledge. I don't even know if I should, because there's so much information that was shared, but the nugget of knowledge, usually, Sam, just to let you know, I usually get a nugget of knowledge that I feel that represents the guests on that particular episode. And today the nugget of knowledge is self-advocate, speak up, and be heard. And I feel that that definitely describes both yourself, Charles, and yourself, Sam. You spoke up, you had, you were angry, you turned around and you were going through different emotions, but you never let it held you down. And I'm gonna kind of add a little extra nugget on there. I'm gonna use Charles' words and just say, keep banging. And at that point,
Yeah, I've seen it on the email.
you can
That's
conquer
it.
anything at that point. You can definitely conquer anything. So
That's it.
thank you very much for joining us on the Green Table Talk. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your ups and your downs and your incredible journey. Keep sharing, keep educating, and feel free to come back anytime.
Thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to meet you guys.
Yes.
You as well.
And we'll be in touch.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Take care.
Good
Goodbye.
night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.